In today's video, we're going to be having a conversation about the biggest problem that the Pokemon company is dealing with right now. But before we jump into it, as always, we do weekly giveaways. All you have to do to enter is leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. But jumping into today's topic, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be having a conversation about the Pokemon company and just some of the problems that it feels like we're really dealing with within the hobby as a whole. As many of you guys are aware, prices for MSRP as well as wholesale have drastically increased since the start of the Scarlet and Violet era. We saw the wholesale price go from roughly around $85 to $86 to $95.50 a booster box, which is over a $10 increase, which is really crazy when you think about how much of a jump that is from a marginal percentage perspective at roughly around 11 or 12%. And since then, the new sets have been performing extremely negatively. Taking a look, obviously, at Scarlet and Violet base set, prices for the booster box are roughly around $96 on TCG Player. Taking a look at Paldea Evolve, they are slightly above wholesale prices at around the low 100s, which you can get it on some sites for in the mid 90s and at that around wholesale price as well. And Obsidian Flame, since the new set release, it's going at around 106, 108 a booster box. So when it comes to the overall just prices, there's nothing that's over the price point of 110, and for most of these items, you're getting them all for around sub 100. If we go take a look at the Sword and Shield era, on the other hand, there is not a single booster box that is below $100, which is funny to think about as well, considering that the Sword and Shield era is still relatively new. It's not that old, and with the MSRP price and the wholesale price being $10 cheaper with an older set, and yet it's still more expensive than the newer generation and the newer sets, it really just goes to show you how there's been such a negative shift and transition within the Pokemon card sphere. Now, does this mean necessarily that, this is it for Pokemon? Of course not. There's always going to be some hyperbolic statements being thrown around when it comes to a new set release, when it comes to a new generation. Everyone's like, this is it, this is the end. But that still should not change the fact of the matter that Pokemon is definitely not in a good spot as it stands right now. I think if we look at the history of the overall Pokemon set releases going back to 2021, we're seeing sets that have a similar pattern of overall performance when it comes to Obsidian Flames, and I think this could potentially lead into a greater issue down the road. Now, what do I mean by this? Obviously, 2021 was one of the best performing years when it came to Pokemon, so that's not to say that we're going to look at any of these items and say, oh, they perform poorly, because, the sets within it have been some of the best performing sets in the Sword and Shield era. Mind you, I'm more or less talking about, or going to be prefacing with, if we look at Evolving Skies, Fusion Strike, and Celebrations, and Brilliant Stars, the 4 sets leading into the start of 2022, what is something that kind of occurred during that event? You had 2 amazing back-to-back sets with Evolving Skies and Celebrations, following up with a mid-set, I would argue, and then finishing it out within that 4-set span with Brilliant Stars, which was a Charizard set that brought back character rares, and there was a ton of hype for it, right? And with this, you kind of had this effect where Fusion Strike was a set that performed extremely poor. It performed so bad. And obviously with this, there were a lot of other sets that also got reprints around this time. So the natural demand that people had for Fusion Strike was extremely low because there were so many other items that you could have been able to pick up, whether it had been Chilling Reign, Battle Styles, Evolving Skies reprints, and so much more. So the whole point that I'm trying to make with this is you had all these amazing sets and all this reprint opportunity around Fusion Strike, and it caused the set to perform poorly. Now, granted, whether you think it's a good set or not, it's still one that was affected drastically by this, and because it was a middle of the road set, in my personal opinion, it performed worse than it should have. And I think so far we've seen the price correction of it being at around, I think, 140, 150 around that price point since we last checked. So it's doing well. It just needed a little bit of time for that to occur. When it comes to Obsidian Flames, I think it's in that exact same boat. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, Eli, Paldea Evolved was a set that is still performing extremely poor. It's been extremely negative, but if we look at the newest set that's about to come out, in the next month and then another set to follow thereafter with Paradox, you have the sentiment of this is just another Charizard set with nothing crazy, Flashpoint 2.0, where instead of getting, your 3 Charizards, you're getting your 3 Charizards. Nothing's changed, right? You're going to have nothing but Charizards as your main hits, and it's just extremely lackluster. So people have taken their money, and what have they done instead? They've saved it up for 151 and as well Paradox, because with the way in which the economy looks right now within Pokemon and the negativity and the just general demand being down, people are picking and choosing which items they would prefer to open, which items they would prefer to invest in, collect in, etc., etc. And they're saying to themselves, I'm going to try and move on and only choose the sets that I like the most. And this might come off as a hot take, although I do think 151 is a great set. It's obviously a smaller set, so it doesn't have a ton of large hits in it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, 151 isn't a set that kind of just blows us out of the water. All it is a set that is giving fan service to the original first generation, which we've seen time and time again, and it's the first time that we're going to be getting a alternate art version of Blastoise and Venusaur, which obviously we're extremely excited to see that happen. But other than that, there's nothing really unique about the set in that regard. It has a couple of the Gen 1 Pokemon character rares. It has, of course, another alternate art version of Mew and Mewtwo. I love the designs. The art designs are amazing. The trainers are amazing. But they're really just trying to sell you on the emphasis of the nostalgia behind the Gen 1 era. If you look at the overall prices of product right now, such as the Elite Trainer boxes, such as the Ultra Premium Collection, they're still sitting right around that MSRP price point because there is a lot of hype around the set. But once it does get officially released and it's going to have multiple waves and it's going to be around Black Friday, prices for this set are going to tank and people are going to come back down to the reality of the situation, which is the Pokemon Company is in a crisis problem of trying to fill the void of the new price increases and keeping up with the general lack of demand by pushing out new sets that people enjoy. And Paldea Evolved, although it's one that I really love because of the art designs, there isn't any fan service that's being given within this set, which is why it's being overlooked, which is why the Charizard set, which has nothing but the Charizard, is being overlooked, and 151 is being seen as better than, if I'm being completely honest, I think it really is, because so far we've had nothing but 3 just back-to-back terrible sets from the sentiment of the overall market. And so for us to get one that's going to have kind of a cool mix-up specialty set feel to it, it's something that makes people kind of get more excited over something than they should, because it's been so bad over the past couple of sets, right? And that's not to say that the Pokemon Company isn't going to come out with some amazing banger of sets within the next year or so, right? Paradox could be an incredible set. Personally speaking, I think that the concept as a whole could be really good if executed properly. If we look at the past 2 generations, it's always the second half art designs that tend to perform the absolute best. The sets tend to perform the best. Taking, for example, within the Sun and Moon era, we obviously got the introduction of the tag team cards, which performed extremely well. It was the introduction of alternate arts, and then going into the Sword and Shield era with the second half, which is funny to say because it wasn't really the second half when you compare the fact of the matter that we really only got about 5 sets within the Sword and Shield era that didn't get alternate arts, and every other set after that got alternate arts. But for the sake of just general innovation within card designs, it's going to be the second half in that regard, right? It's going to be the next half of new art designs, and it could be absolutely amazing. But is it too late, right? And I say, is it too late, because when it comes to Pokemon, it's very sensitive when looking at the overall volatility. It can cause some hyperbolic pressure either to the upside or to the downside based on the overall sentiment within a set and the overall sentiment within a generation. And that's not to say that it's entirely possible that You know, we could have some amazing performing sets within the Scarlet and Violet era, regardless of if it's going to perform well as an era overall. But what that is to say is that it's not going to be like it was within the Sword and Shield era, where sets such as the worst performing sets, battle styles, the original Chilling Reign prices, of course, what it is now, we can see how well it's performed. Fusion Strike, Astral Radiance, all of these booster boxes have been performing ridiculously well, right? I think we could see what I would believe is the new norm, going back to how it was in the Sun and Moon era, going back to how it was in the XY era, where prices are going to be hovering slightly above the wholesale price and nowhere near the MSRP price, and it's going to be that way for a while. I could be 100% wrong. Things could change, and it's just really these first 3 or 4 sets and, you know, however many thereafter that are going to perform poorly. But it just feels as if we're going back to the old norm where we shouldn't be expecting free tendies for every single Pokemon item. Obviously, you're gonna have those sets that are gonna perform better compared to the rest of their generation. For example, taking a look at the XY era, Roaring Skies performed extremely well because of the competitive value of the Shaman. Taking a look at Evolutions as another set, Hidden Fates as another set. There were sets that even during the times of, you know, normal volatility, you had your outliers, and so it's entirely possible we could see that. But when it comes to the price of $151 right now, it definitely is not that outlier, as if you're looking at the Ultra Premium Collection Mew, it's already below MSRP price, whereas the Charizard Ultra Premium Collection, which a lot of people now see as a brick because of how much it was printed into the ground, it was pre-selling for $300+ a UPC, which goes to show you the general change and effect that people feel towards the UPC. As said earlier before in the video, obviously this is something where I don't think this is the end of Pokemon. I'm not going to be hyperbolic in that sentiment. I just think that we're in a little bit of a rough patch, and as someone who obviously has distributors, when it comes to the purchasing of the Scarlet and Violet era product, most of them are just sitting on distributor pages. No one's picking them up, and for the Sword and Shield era booster boxes and products, typically speaking with the most recent reprints, if you wanted to pick them up, you actually had to pick up some bundled Scarlet and Violet booster boxes, Elite Trainer box, and other items. So the Pokemon Company is obviously aware of the overall demand based on the fact that they're taking older, higher demand sets and reprinting them to be able to just sell this. The only item that I can think of right now that isn't really being bundled that just got recently reprinted for the Sword and Shield era is Crown Zenith Elite Trainer boxes, which right now you're actually able to pick them up for wholesale prices by joining our Patreon program. So if you want to take advantage of that and be able to access Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Flesh and Blood, and so much more at wholesale prices, I highly recommend you join the Patreon. Links down in the description below. Definitely join now before it's too late. We just open a couple of spots and they usually sell out really fast. Since the recording of this video, we've got 3 spots left. And previous to that, we were sold out for months, where you only have about 1 or 2 spots of people leaving about every month, and they sell out again every 15 minutes after they finally open up. So definitely take advantage while you can. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, the Pokemon Company, they're just not doing enough right now. You can't just bundle all of your product and expect that people are going to continue to buy it, and that's just the end of it. They need to do more right now within this generation to kind of pick up the pace, so that it's not going to be these bricks that are going to continuously being sold, and you're just going to go back and you're going to reprint each and every set within the Sword and Shield era that is in the current standard rotation, if it means it's going to be a way for you to bundle it up with your current Scarlet and Violet era product so that it will move. They need to do something that's going to be able to push and move on its own. Hopefully 151 will perform well on its overall release, but as mentioned before, it's going to have multiple waves. It's going to be printed into the ground. So when it comes to how that's overall going to affect the market, whether you think of it as a positive thing or not, you're going to see the overall effects of that with local game stores not being able to compete with big box retailers that are going to be flash selling it because of how much is going to be readily available on the market. It's good for you guys that are long-term investors and collectors, but when it comes to the overall health of the market, that still isn't going to generally change things, as looking at just how the economy is right now, people are struggling, commercial real estate prices are drastically going down, and you still need a place for people to play for the game to survive.